Hey guys, I've got a bit of a mess. Usually I do clean up after myself. This is last week's mess. So before we get started on any building for this week, we gotta clean this up. Boom! Looks a lot better because it's clean. Anyhow guys, welcome to week 12. Today and the rest of this week, we are going to be focusing on completing the castle grounds as much as possible and then working our way towards that section over there and a little bit further behind depending on how much time we have left in the video, because I'm starting to find that I've got a trend of making 30-minute long videos, and I hope you're enjoying them, but that's a lot of content to be working on every week. Anyhow, so basically what you can see from this vantage point is going to be the main focus for this week's video. We're going to improve on the castle grounds over here, and we're also going to do a little bit of work over here on the inner courtyard, which we haven't really touched in any of the videos at all. Just a quick recap. I'm going to step back. This is the back of Hogwarts Castle. That's the west wing of the castle with the Great Hall, and this is the east wing. This tall building, astronomy tower, bell towers, long gallery, central tower, and this is the inner courtyard. Now, normally it's supposed to be a square, but because of size restrictions, the astronomy tower should have been right here, but I've had to move it forward so that it fits in the mock. So we have a slightly smaller space that we're dealing with, and typically that also has quite a large tree right in the middle of it. And it does look quite nice, but I have a little bit of a problem with putting a tree here because if you remember a few weeks ago, I designed this, which is a wall that comes off for the long gallery so that you can see into the library, which is kind of falling apart. There's stuff everywhere. But if I put a tree in the way, then you can't see into that library. So we're going to have to figure out another way to put a little bit of detail into that space. And then we have to build up this wall, which you did see in last week's episode in the Hogwarts Legacy clips. But just as a reference, it'll look pretty much like this. Just mirrored on this side and come up to maybe about right there. And it's just a separation between the inner courtyard and the castle grounds. So without further ado, let's jump into some building. So as boring as this wall might look, it's important to remember that this is supposed to be a supporting act of a building, if you will. You're never looking at that and going, wow, what an architectural marvel. You're kind of looking at these buildings here. Of course, it is just supposed to be a wall, and that's basically what it's doing. I'm going to do a little bit of ramparts on the top just to finish it off because it does look quite plain. I'm going to come around the other side because this is where I think it gets a little bit more intriguing, is I've made a covered archway over here. And while I'm not entirely certain of what I'm going to be putting in there at the moment, I did have some thoughts. One of them might be that I could put some statues, and this could almost be an alcove, and I could put like the founders in here or something, or it could just be a passageway that you leave the courtyard and you can walk down here, and I imagine thered be more buildings. So we have a little bit of room to play off with. And then when it comes to what we're going to be doing over in this section over here, I think I'm just going to try to lay out some basic pebbled paths and some trees, small ones, of course, like those ones over there. And we'll see how this starts to turn out. Ramparts. And some more ramparts. So there you go. There's that little building. It only took about 20 minutes to build, and it does its job. I'll come around the other side. So it's looking like from the outside, castle wall. I think it's looking pretty cool. I'll have to tile off the top over there. And the next step is to figure out what to do inside. Right, well, good morning, guys. It is All I Want for Christmas, apparently, by Michael Bublé. Okay, right, sorry about that. I have no idea why Christmas music came on. What I meant to say is that it is currently 6:50 a.m. and I am up at 6:50 a.m. because it is now Friday morning, and as you know, these weekly uploads usually come out Saturday afternoon, my time. Could be different from where you live, but yeah, it's Friday morning and I've yet to do any major progress besides this. So we've got a lot to pump out. So here we are at 6:50 in the morning, about to do some work on Hogwarts. I've got the fireplace on, warming me up, and we're gonna get started on the inner courtyard. So you will see that there are the beginnings of progress going on here in the inner courtyard. But what you didn't see, because I've already covered it up, is when I built this, all the plates come one plate away from the edge of the base plate, and I left a one stud gap all the way along the back of the mock. For reasons unknown. I believe when I first did it, the intention was so that I could play around with how the border looks or what have you. But what it really meant is that I actually just had to fill in the edge with a row of plates and then connect it back in. I also had to tear this down and make it one brick wider on the end right here so that it comes flush to the edge. And I've also just experimented over here with some rock work, which I think looks decent, just to integrate a little bit with the building over here. I think it just adds a little bit more interest than before, as if this really is just a section slice right through the mock. And then we played around with just some variation in the side of the terrain. We're gonna take a look now onto the inside of this alcove. I did decide to go ahead with some statues. It's a very simple design. We just got some light gray bricks with some jumper plates, and we're using the 20th anniversary. I'm trying to find a good angle here. We're using the 20th anniversary minifigures right in there, and then I put a candle in the middle. Oh, and hopefully you guys can hear me all right. There's just a natural thing of not wanting to speak too loudly this early in the morning. But if my voice really is that bad, then I will make the decision to just record some audio later and overlay it on this video. But if you don't notice that there's some weird dubbing of sound, then I'm speaking loud enough. And here's just a better look at what this alcoved wall building looks like with the roof back on and the statues inside. So as I said before, it's not really a big enough space to do anything significant, but I think that does add to the aesthetic of the courtyard, and add just a little bit of detail. So there we go. It's a simple building, but it does its job. And then now here I was just experimenting with how I might do the path. I did a few variations where I was working on things more like that, where it's just tiles and pebbles and such. But I wasn't too convinced with how it turned out, so I decided to go with something that would tie in the inside of the courtyard with the outside of the castle grounds over here, by just making a really nice organic pathway that goes from this doorway of the astronomy tower to this alcoved outer wall over here. And then we're going to spruce up the rest of it with some little bushes, flowers, a few trees. And really what's going to populate this scene is the minifigures. So for the rest of this, there isn't really much detail needed. And then of course, lastly, I've gone ahead and stolen a lot more of these chess pieces from I guess this is the Philosopher's Stone chess set that came out a few years ago. I think there's some incredible builds, and I'm throwing them all around the castle to sort of bring it to life. So these are the pawns, and they're guarding the entrance to the astronomy tower. And lastly, before I do any work on this area, I just want to point out this back section over here, which is pretty much impossible to get to. And I will come around the other side actually to show you what this space looks like from a better vantage point. So there is some detailing on this side of the wall, but what I'm mostly concerned with is the height difference between the two levels of plates and where you can see the exposed yellow filler brick. And I'm going to just try to cover that up with a little bit of rock work, so that looks a little bit more seamless. As I said, this is an area that you can pretty much not see from any proper angle. So we're going to try to fill it wisely, probably just with some trees, enough to draw your attention more to this outer area over here. And then look at that, with just a few plants, some minifigures, and a little bit of scene building, we have got a finished inner courtyard. Now, of course, it is admittedly a little bit simple, but like I said, the main idea of how I'm designing this is that so I have ample access to get my human hand into this space and to lift this up so that we can see into the long gallery here. So that was pretty much the most crucial part of building this area here, on top of course, making it look pretty decent. I'll just walk you through what I did go ahead and do. We've got Filch up here on the ramparts, managing the castle as he does, with Scabbers running about in the background. Got McGonagall walking along this pathway to the astronomy tower, off to teach some transfiguration in her classroom back over there. And then over here we have an Easter egg to Hogwarts Legacy, if you've ever played the game. This is one of the little mini games that you see, and it's typically actually out here in the castle grounds. And the way it works is you're basically just launching a ball with your wand along the length of the table, and depending on how far you throw it is how many points you get. So it's 100, 50, 20, and 10 points, I believe. To all the people who just watched that clip and were like, that's wrong, I apologize. You are actually supposed to summon the ball, hence the name Summoner's Court. The ball starts at the end of the table, and the further you summon it towards you, the more points you get. There's no throwing involved. I thought I'd just throw it there in Lego for a little bit of fun. We got Hermione, Luna, and Dean, all of various ages, playing that little game there. And of course, we got a little tree just to spice things up. And we can't forget this marvelous little rock build covering up that little bit of filler brick over there. We're doing pretty decently on time right now. And we're now going to move on from the inner courtyard to something a little bit more exciting. We're moving on to the Forbidden Forest area, which is going to be a lot of fun to get going on. And by that, I mean we're going to start working on the trees. Now, of course, there are many, many different ways of building trees of varying sizes and types. What I'm going to go with is really quite a simple design because it will allow for modification later if I choose to change them. I'm going to go with a very simple pine tree design using pretty much just these two parts. So by using these two pieces, we're essentially going to build the simplest but strongest tree that we can with a limited source of parts. This is going to be the base of our tree, just a 2x2 round brick, the trunk, of course. And then by using these, what we're going to do is instead of attaching tree branches or tree leaves, straight onto the trunk and ruining the structural integrity of it by putting these very flimsy leaves in between all the layers, we're instead going to be using this, and by attaching the leaves onto the bracket, as such, we retain the integrity of the tree, and we have an easy way to mount a bunch of tree leaves onto them. So we're going to jump into a little time lapse here. We're going to build up the Forbidden Forest. Alrighty, so here we have the trees done. Like I said before, they're quite simple, but I really like how they turned out. They're just really adding to the body of this area over here. Now I'm just stepping away from the mock a little bit. I'm actually half in the kitchen. And we're trying to take a look at it from this vantage point to try to see if that's enough. I think the trees are a little too clustered right now. I'm not going to move any of the existing ones, but I think that we need to build some more. And I'm thinking of putting one behind Hagrid's hut in front of that rampart wall, because it's such a plain wall to begin with, and one really here closer to the lake. I think we need to fill this space and that space over there, so that when you're looking at Hogwarts Castle from this side, the entire back half looks like it's all forest. So we're going to do that. What we're also going to try to do is in the spaces in between, so about right here, maybe one right here, is we're going to put some smaller trees. And we're going to start interspersing some foliage to make this area seem a little fuller. But let me know what you guys think of these trees. Now, of course, they're not the most complicated or really complicated at all, but they're trees, and it's a forbidden forest. All right, guys, it is 8:26 now. That's pretty much marking the end of what I can work on before I have to run off. Let's show you what I've done. Create a few scenes here. I'm going to take a step back and show you the Forbidden Forest. You can see we've added quite a few more trees, really dressed up this area. We've spruced it up with a few smaller ones over here on the side. We built this new one over here, as well as that new one back there by the ramparts. Got some centaurs populating this forest. Got another one here. And of course, Harry casting his Patronus. Gonna come around the other side. This is looking a whole lot better than it was previously. I've just made this impromptu scene of Harry and Buckbeak. Buckbeak is tied up to this fence post over here by a chain, Hagrid out by the door. We'll come around just lastly over here, show you closer from this angle what you'd be looking at. You were looking from, get you an angle here if you're looking from out from the ramparts, and this is looking really, really good. Well, in any case, guys, that is the end of week 12. I apologize for what might be a shorter video, although I did try to explain last week that this would become a little bit more of the norm. Not the waking up at 6 a.m. part, but the fact that I'm going to get a little bit less progress done every week, but I'm still going to keep to making at least one video a week. So the weekly updates will not stop. Forbidden Forest is done for this week. I might modify it next week if I have some future thoughts, but I think it's really added to the bulk of this area over here. If you take a step back and look at the overall Hogwarts, this is definitely feeling part of the mock now. It doesn't go from these huge spires to just flat ground, so we've got some height going on here with the trees. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and of course we did the inner courtyard, just a little bit of building over there. So I hope you enjoy this video, and you'll stay tuned for week 13, guys. See you next week.